So, as you know, this is escalating. A port that exports crude oil was struck in Kuwait 2 days ago. Desalination plants, bridges struck in Kuwait and Iran, power plants. Oil prices are up. But we'll see what they're like tomorrow. But Kuwait is being attacked as we speak. Iran has threatened to strike the entire infrastructure in the Gulf. Yesterday's attack by the US was limited, but 2 military personnel, a general and a former Navy SEAL I spoke to today in the last couple of hours, both told me that based on the military movement we're seeing, we should expect escalation. A few minutes ago, while you're being set up with the producers, according to Israeli media, 3 outlets were talking about it. The Americans have, according to American media, the Americans have warned the Gulf that if there's no deal by this week, which is fucking today, they should prepare for escalation. And the same thing's being informed to the Israelis. And from an economic sense, the Chinese have started buying up oil. I'm not sure if you saw that report. I think we spoke briefly about it last time before your connection cut out. What the hell is happening, man?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I mean, first of all, obviously, one big story is the continued escalation, which you've just talked about. The only things I'd add to that are that I think Trump was threatening to strike energy infrastructure recently. Presumably, he knows that will be a tit for tat kind of a deal. And as you said, they're already going after the Kuwaiti desalination plants pretty hard. I think Kuwait's getting hit really hard because they're allowing the Americans to fire ATACMS missiles into Iran, which I just don't understand why they do that. I also saw a really interesting statement by the former foreign minister of Iran. So it's not an official statement, but it's clearly like an attempt to communicate something. And he basically said, like, we should do a ground invasion into Kuwait, like a limited ground invasion.
That's what I was mentioning it in my last interview. I couldn't remember the statement, but yeah, there was an Iranian official talking about it. Yep.
An ex-official, former official, but that's how you seed an idea, right? And I was going back and forth with somebody on Twitter about that to try and figure out what they're talking about. It could be a ground incursion by the Iraqi Shiite militias. I mean, that's actually possible. You could do it without the Iranian military. I think they're really, really mad at Kuwait right now. But it looks like the war is going to spread. And like, I know you've had people on already that, have raised concerns that the Trump administration may be forced by circumstance, by their limited capacity to escalate, to engage in some sort of a ground offensive, some sort of limited ground offensive where they try and take a bit of land and then use it as leverage, bargaining, whatever, in some sort of a negotiation. I really hope they don't do that. It will be, number one, suicide, basically, because they'd just be hit with drones the whole time. And number two, once that happened, it would be like Vietnam or something. The US just wouldn't have a capacity to get out. But in terms of the energy markets, I think the big story is what you just said. The Chinese are moving to buy oil again. So I said when the Chinese stopped buying oil, I was a little bit confused about it. I think we talked about it one of the first times I came on. And I was like, why wouldn't the Chinese just like turn the screw here, right? I mean, the Chinese, don't want to see America kind of bogged down in someone because they have their own concerns over Taiwan, etc. So why? And I think at the time I speculated, they might have cut some sort of a deal or something like that around Taiwan. But I also said, and I think it was completely key, that the Chinese are tough bargainers. They're tough negotiators. They're tough negotiators in business as well as in government. Chinese are just very tough negotiators. It's well known. And so I thought what probably happened was they said, we'll give you 60 days. I think the whole MOU deadline was a 60-day respite where the Chinese basically agreed to take to start utilizing their energy reserves, and they set a hard limit on that because the Chinese always do that. They're very cautious in their diplomacy, very clear, legalistic people. And so they said 60 days, and if you can't get it over the line in 60 days, we're going back to purchasing. And I think basically since the Trump administration has sunk the MOU, the Chinese are back in the market now. Now, the data, I think you showed it on one of your shows recently. It's provisional data. I think it's done with tracking tankers or something, but it looks pretty reliable. Now, the numbers on it are basically that they're now going to be importing an extra 3.5 million barrels a day. They were at the low point taking in 6 million barrels a day. So they're up, and at their high point, at their normal, they're at 12 million barrels. So they're back up halfway, right? But there's absolutely no reason, unless oil prices start to rise, why they don't go back up to 12 million barrels a day. So I think that's the big story. The respite, the Chinese, the amount of respite, there's the chart, yeah. The amount of respite that the Chinese gave the oil market, I don't think it was as important as some people highlight. I don't think it was enough to suppress oil price. I still think oil price is manipulated, and maybe we can talk about the potential for a short squeeze this week, which is being speculated on at the moment. The Chinese thing was important, and that's now coming to an end. So that's on the demand side. And then on the supply side, I think, as you said, we talked about it briefly before my silly internet got cut off, is basically the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Iranian willingness to hit the oil pipelines. And I ran some numbers on that since. It's quite shocking. If you add up the capacity of the Strait, the oil pipelines, and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, you come to about 20%, 22% of world's oil supplies. Yeah. So we've currently seen about 10, 11% being cut off through the Strait. If they shut down the rest of that, it's double. So, yeah. Welcome to
and also the Houthis. The Houthis have announced that there'll be a major announcement tomorrow. They've put out a statement that there'll be a major announcement to the Yemeni people made tomorrow. And in terms of Saudi, Saudi was attacked. The Yanbu was attacked 2 days ago as well.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like we're going to get a war between the Saudis and the Yemenis. And as I said last time on the show, I don't see any reason why the IRGC can't get involved in that war to put pressure on the Saudis. The opposition to the Yemenis, I guess it's the official Yemeni government, but like it's not really. The Houthis kind of run Yemen. They're very fractured. It's a bunch of different groups. And last time the Saudis had a bit of an easy time of it because it was a conventional like war. And the Saudis aren't known to be great military, but they have modern equipment, American equipment, so they could engage in a bombing campaign. Not quite like Gaza, but kind of similar. It was like there were no defenses. The Houthis had like small arms and so on. But this time around, the Houthis have weapon systems that they didn't have before. There's some speculation that they have short-range air defense systems as well, which could make a bombing campaign quite difficult. So, I really think we're probably going to some sort of a general Middle Eastern war at this stage. And so then that means that the oil market, 20% of the oil market's going to be offline for the foreseeable future. And, I mean, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think we're going to get our great reset in a sense, because the world economy you can't have up to capacity growth and economic activity when a fifth of your energy is cut off. We had a pretty good experiment for what that looks like, the lockdowns. So during the lockdowns, I think it was about 15 or 20% down oil demand. And so the response to this will probably be some sort of energy lockdown, would be my guess. Rationing system, but also energy lockdown. So probably work from home. I mean, I joked with a friend of mine that thank God we won't have to wear a mask again because oil shortages aren't contagious. But, functionally, it'll be the same. It'll be like, I don't know. So it looks that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being pessimistic. Maybe Trump will calm the situation down. But I posted something on Twitter today from a Bloomberg article that got attention on my Twitter, but it didn't get much attention on the Bloomberg article. The Khamenei, the supreme leader, who hasn't been seen, obviously, but he keeps making statements, put out a statement today in Iran calling for peace between rival political factions. And basically what he was saying was, those who criticize the attempts to negotiate are being too aggressive to the doves. So that should give you a state of play of where they're at in Iranian politics. I mean, not only does it seem like they've given up on negotiations, but the supreme leader is actively trying to defend the people who attempted the negotiations.
Are you sure about this statement? Are you sure it's not? I'm just checking now because I haven't heard of it. And yes, yesterday he issued a written statement that he didn't put one today on YouTube, because I watch his announcements. He put one yesterday threatening that if lessons that won't forget when criticizing U.S. breaches. You're talking about that one? So I
think so. I just saw it in part of a Bloomberg essay. If you go on my X account, you probably won't.
Okay, if it's part of
third tweet or something, it was reported in a Bloomberg article this morning. So unless Bloomberg got
maybe
wrong,
I thought there was a new statement today. So they're talking about the one from before.
So the point is, it's become completely controversial now to even talk about diplomacy in Iran. I think the Americans have really screwed the pooch on this one. I don't think they understand that when you get yourself into a position that they've got themselves into, you may actually not be able to negotiate. And I think they're pretty close to that now.
Yeah, there's so a spokesman for the Houthis said a statement from the Yemeni armed forces will be released tomorrow, God willing, to announce an important position that reflects the aspirations of our great people. The Kurds are being bombed right now. Kuwait was just bombed, and Iran was bombed before that. That's all in the last hour. Meanwhile, Saudi was bombed 2 days ago. Yanbu. If the entire if this does become a Gulf region, if let's say Yanbu, Bab el-Mandeb, and Strait of Hormuz is shut for 6 months, we're talking about a bad case scenario, which is, by the way, plausible considering how things are going now. What happens to oil? What would be what happens to oil and the global economy? What will be the consequences of that?
Well, you'd have to shut down about 1/5 of global economic activity. That's kind of the point. I mean, roughly, we can do some, efficiency gains or whatever, but ultimately, you're going to have to shut down, 15% or something of the economy. And as I said, we have a pretty good test case for that. It was the first 6 months, I'd say, of the lockdowns. So March 2020 to, I don't know, after the summer that year. And everyone remembers that. You weren't leaving the house. You were sitting in your pajamas watching Netflix or whatever and getting paid by the government. But what can they do? I mean, we don't have the fiscal capacity to do another lockdown. So you'd have to do some sort of a different version of it. I mean, I talked to some people that were in a government that were thinking about this, and they were going right up to thinking about getting the military to do school runs to stop parents driving to school. That's kind of what you're talking about, or QR codes to get fuel. So you'd have to reprioritize the fuel supply, right? So you'd need to say, okay, what's the top priority? Well, again, we have a pretty good template for this in the lockdowns. It was the prioritization of, remember, necessary workers. So you'd do the same thing. You'd say, it's more necessary for delivery trucks to have access to diesel than civilian, because you need to get the food to the shops, But that's what you'd have to do. I mean, you'd have to do some sort of
mass fuel rationing. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think oil price would hit before we see massive demand destruction? Because there'd be a certain level when you hit that price, there'd be such massive demand destruction that will kind of put a ceiling to the price.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, the economists will all assume that the market will dictate this properly, but it actually won't dictate it properly. That's the problem. When you're you see the laws of supply and demand and rational price setting and stuff don't work when you have a shortage of a basic good. And this is why, for example, in the Second World War, there was physical fuel rationing, because you have to prioritize certain sectors, At the end of the day, it just is more important that the logistics sector, that deliveries are made to shops over school runs. And, school runs in upper middle class neighborhoods may be quite price inelastic, as you say in economics. They may, you may be able to raise prices quite significantly, and, the yummy mummy in her SUV still takes the kids to school. Well, that's no good. You can't deal with that because she's sucking up gas that you need for the physical delivery. So I think when you reach that point, demand destruction through price mechanism alone won't happen. I also think there'll be extremely strong pressures on the government to engage in some sort of a rationing program. I mean, when we had the energy crisis of 2022 after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, prices were fixed, in effect. The European countries especially put in place price caps. Those were government mandated gas prices. Nobody thinks of it that way, but that's what they were. Now, we never got to the point where we had to physically ration that, but it was touch and go for a while. So in terms of the oil price, the big question now in the coming 2 weeks is if there'll be a huge short squeeze. So at the moment, the energy prices are going up, as you said. Diesel prices are going up particularly fast. I think jet fuel is the first market to break. I think diesel is the second market to break, and then probably downstream from that is gasoline and so on. But basically the energy market's tightening up, but the short positions, the enormous 95% net short position that's on in the market is still there. this is some combination of the algorithmic manipulation that I talked about, and there also might be a little bit of funny, government intervention that we don't fully know. But at a certain point, I think we talked about it when the oil price collapsed. If you have those positions in place, you push the price up past a certain point, and there'll be short calls, right? There'll be margin calls for the shorts, and the shorts will get squeezed. Again, it's like if anyone's ever traded, whatever, Bitcoin or whatever, and if you're using a leveraged instrument, everything relies on your margin. It's not actually, you can't hold it till it goes to zero. You can only tolerate it within the margin that's in place for your leveraged bet. So there's a theoretical margin that's in place on those shorts that are in the market right now. And nobody knows what would wipe them out, but I'd say shorts start getting squeezed at about 85, 90 bucks a barrel. And if there's a massive short squeeze, you might just see this kind of whipsaw,
Is that WTI or Brent?
WTI, I think, yeah. It would need to go up a bit more. I don't know. Nobody actually knows, because nobody even knows who these shorts are, to be honest. I mean, it's a mystery. But there should, in theory, be a short squeeze at a certain point. But the fact of the matter is, the oil futures and even the oil spot market, I'm just not convinced they mean anything anymore. The crack spread on diesel is like significantly higher than the diesel price right now. And that's to my mind, like the combination of the price and the crack spread is the actual end product price, right? So like, to me, that's the price. And as we've discussed before, when they get the futures or spot price down, the crack spread responds by going up, So it seems to me it's the two of them together are the actual delivery price. We still don't fully understand what's feeding into the crack spread. We've discussed it before. I have a few theories about it, or I have a theory about it. But it's those two things together that determine the price. So I don't even think the oil price matters that much, except from a psychological point of view, and except from the point of view of Trump. The oil price matters to Trump. The thing is, in a weird way, whoever's manipulating that oil market is prolonging the war. That's the real way to think about it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's one thing you can't manipulate. If you could show this graph on the screen, Stephanie, and that's the strategic petroleum reserves. The hard assets cannot be manipulated, and that will eventually reflect in the price people pay at the gas station.
We discussed it before. SPR is going to run to critical levels before the November midterms.
But exactly. But you're talking about Trump watching the futures, but Trump would be watching that and the gas prices as well at the pump.
I really think he's getting bad advice. I'm convinced of that. I don't have any proof of that, but just watching the behavior, watching how he talks about the oil price, I think he's getting bad advice. I think Scott Bessent is sitting around worrying about these things. And
but Scott Bessent has Trump's ear.
Yeah, but not his main ear. His main ear is focused on the war, He's focused on how do we get the...
You don't need his main... Sorry to interrupt, but you don't need his main ear to just say, Mr. President, our strategic petroleum reserves are down to these levels. They'll run out by then, and gas prices at the pump will go up to that price by then. And that alone should be enough to say Trump, like, okay, give me 2 hours.
But it's not. He's just escalating the war. Like, it's clear that either that information is not getting to him or he's not listening to it for whatever reason. I don't think he's getting the information properly, personally, but there's a chance he's not listening to it too. But either way, it's not making any difference.